Good morning. This is the Brew, and I'm your host, Lex. Today is another day of crypto, except we have an expert on. Joining us from Zero Hash is Will Klippel. We're going to interview him today and get his whole take on the industry at large. I think we've got a really fun, full-packed day of crypto today. So let's get at it and get to that opening bell. Mal,
it's gonna be a good day.
This is your day again. Unbelievable, right? How are you?
It's gonna be a good one. I'm good.
I got the inner office memo to wear the dark outfit today, just like you did.
I know. I would stay tuned for this one, everyone. Stay in because this is an expert in crypto. This is going to be a fun show.
Yep, it is. So I've known Will for a good bit. So he's been a good friend of ours at Tradier and personally. So he's got quite a background. We're gonna let him tell us all about it when we get there. And then we're gonna go through a variety of topics on crypto. So it's going to be a great educational episode. I think this is.
These topics.
Wait a minute. These topics. It's just in. I swear. Hot off the press. Are you ready? Should we get busy?
So
I think we're going to need all the whole deal, right?
I know. I went back on coffee today just because I wanted to be fully awake.
I know. I got my little red cup today. I'm going red cup.
Oh, nice.
So, yeah, nice. This is a good one. Oh,
you're very Christmassy. You're very market green and red.
Yeah, I'm kind of unseasonal. All right, let's get Will out here and get busy. What do you say?
You
ready for this? Let's go.
Yes.
Bring it. Good morning, Will Klippel. How are you?
I'm doing great. After an intro like that, it's hard not to feel pretty excited to be here. It's good to see you guys.
You too, man. That's quite the commercial. I love that thing. So is that a marketing thing? I'm assuming from you guys. It's a big commercial.
Yeah, I had zero personally to do with that. I wish I could take some credit, but we've got an incredible marketing team, and that specifically was around our launch earlier this year with Stripe. So Stripe's one of the many customers that we work with directly to provide digital asset infrastructure for.
Cool. All right, Mal, I'm gonna get started because then I'm gonna take a side seat. I'm gonna ask Will a couple questions here, and then I'm gonna let you take over for the basics.
All right, I'm gonna get comfortable.
Yep. So, Will, first of all, let's get people familiar with you. So, give us the introduction. Tell us a bit about yourself and your background relative to Zero Hash and crypto.
Yeah, sure.
And
so, totally. So, born and raised in St. Louis, Missouri, which is far, way away from Wall Street, but went there after college, started my career with Forex.com. So I was an early employee there. At the time, Forex.com was kind of like the E-Trade for currency trading. They had the fortitude to get that URL early and grew with it. Got the opportunity to set up their UK operation. So it's based out of London for a number of years. Shifted from retail foreign currency trading to institutional FX, working specifically for an ECN and running their prime brokerage business there. Before that, then shifting over to algorithmic trading, specifically AI and natural language processing, which is Lex when I met you a few years ago on that front. And then more recently, at the start of this year, transitioned to Zero Hash to be fully into crypto now. I had been involved personally and professionally in crypto previously, but this is kind of the time now that I'm fully immersed in the product.
Okay, great. That's quite the background. So to me, it seems like, you started out in the traditional financial markets, let's say.
Yep.
What was the, kind of the catalyst for you to kind of sort of shift gears and get into the crypto space?
Yeah, I mean, candidly, like I've always thought of myself as a trader. I've always personally traded. So, even starting early in my career when I was working at FX, I also traded equities options, in my PA account. And even had oil royalties in Wichita, Kansas. Just kind of like to dabble in a lot of different tradable markets and tradable products. And so crypto around 2017 got my attention because that's when Bitcoin was kind of crossing over the $1,000 mark. It was starting to get a little bit of play on CNBC, but not much. And for me, coming from FX, where it's already a 24/5 market, I was like, well, add 2 more days into the mix, and let's get after it. So I started trading crypto in my PA account in 2017. And it's funny, I didn't really start to appreciate the much wider application of it until I started to dig into the different blockchains, the different use cases, and really stop thinking of it as just spot crypto and started looking at the entire ecosystem of digital assets.
Okay, that's interesting. So I'm sure you found that the crypto markets relative to traditional financial markets. There's got to be certain things that are way different and other things that are certainly similar. What do you have around that? The differences and similarities.
So it's funny. Like a lot of people just say crypto, but that's such an all-encompassing term, right? So you've got like spot crypto, you have crypto derivatives, you have crypto CFDs outside of the US, which is huge. And then you have all of the other, tokenized assets, which actually have, nothing to do with, Bitcoin or Ethereum, whether they're trading on exchange or off exchange, right? And so a lot of the similarities are that you still need to have certain functions represented in the market. You still have to have a market maker. For spot crypto, there needs to be an exchange or a broker involved. And what we're finding is that as the market matures, some of these roles that you find in traditional finance are starting to mature as well. So like the concept of a central limit order book or a central clear, some of these concepts that are very common in traditional markets have to, kind of materialize within crypto and are starting to materialize in crypto. But that's kind of the main differences. And of course, like the 24/7 nature, obviously it's always on. There's also centralized exchanges versus decentralized exchanges. So the decentralized nature of crypto at its core creates some challenges, but also creates a lot of opportunities.
Okay, cool. All right, I'm going to let Molly take us on the path of we'll start out with the basics, Molly. So I'm a beginner with crypto.
Okay.
So
we're all beginners.
Well, yeah, except for Will.
I was gonna say, I mean, candidly, I might still be in my infancy as well. I mean, there's so much to learn. There's just a wealth of information out there.
All right, Molly, you take it over for the basics. Let's do it.
We're going to draw a line down the screen, and we're the newbies over here.
All right, fair enough.
So everyone's dying to know the name of your company, not to be mistaken with the debut that Bitcoin had on the Silk Road and what it was trading.
Yeah.
We're talking
Yeah.
mining, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, we are talking exactly, and it's funny actually that the firm originally was called Seed CX, and morphed into Zero Hash, as we matured. But yeah, so
Okay.
the firm itself's been around since 2017, so in 6 years plus, which in crypto terms is like 6 decades. It may as well have been
Right. Dog years,
so
yeah.
pretty well established. Yeah.
Right.
So what is Bitcoin?
Yeah. So I mean, Bitcoin is.
And sorry to interrupt, if you were Margot Robbie in a bathtub, can you give us that version?
You sent me that already, didn't you?
Yeah. I'll give you the kind of the quick and dirty. So Bitcoin was the first cryptocurrency, right? And when we say cryptocurrency, what we're really talking about in the simplest terms is a digital asset that is secured by cryptography that lives on a distributed ledger, right?
Okay.
Meaning that there is no central bank or central holding company for this asset. It is distributed, right? So Bitcoin, I think the white paper was written in 2008, but I think it launched like January 2009. Satoshi Nakamoto is a pseudonym, but who wrote that white
Is that
paper?
a real
So
guy?
unlike,
Sorry
yeah,
to interrupt.
exactly.
Is that
Are
a
you
real
him,
guy?
Will? Will, are
Yeah,
you
You're
him?
him.
I
Okay.
wish if I was him, I would be on an island somewhere, because I think he's got a lot of
You
Bitcoin.
You could be when you're just
That
not
would
telling
be
us on an island.
that'd be the best reveal I think you guys could have on
Totally.
your show. Unfortunately, no. But Bitcoin at its core is the stalwart of cryptocurrencies, right? So it has been commonly referred to as digital gold. It is scarce. There's a finite supply. There's 21 million total. It's got these halving events that have to do with the mining. Trying to keep it simple, it is a proof of work cryptocurrency, which means that there's an effort for the computers to validate each transaction, right? And so on a distributed ledger, you have a whole bunch of different validators working to make sure that the books and records are legitimate. The cool thing about Bitcoin is that you can go back over that distributed ledger, that blockchain, and see every transaction that's ever been done in a public way since the beginning, right? So unlike a bank, you and I can't go and say, okay, what transactions have been done through HSBC, today or for the last year or 10 years or whatever. With Bitcoin, you actually can go and do that. Mm-hmm. And so it was originally created as a P2P cash, system without the need of a central authority, in simple terms. And, I guess it's been 15 years since then. And now it's really matured into a true store of value that's being leveraged by companies, by countries, by individuals, and it's not going away. As they say, that you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube,
Right.
Mal,
and they've tried before. Tried before.
Let me ask something to Will. I want to make sure I understand the relationship here. So I have to put everything in terms of fun sort of beverages for adults.
Okay.
So my understanding, if I'm right about this, I could be wrong. Cryptocurrency is like whiskey. Whiskey is a large, epithet term for everything underneath it. So cryptocurrency is like whiskey, and then bourbon is a whiskey, like Bitcoin is a cryptocurrency, and then Ethereum is like rye. Is it kind of like that?
See? I like that analogy. I like that analogy. I mean, it's early in the morning, but all of these things are interesting
so
for me.
Good,
so,
Alex.
But no, you're right. Yeah. So if you can think about it, is Bitcoin was the catalyst for cryptocurrencies, but there's thousands and thousands of cryptocurrencies out there. Mm-hmm. At Zero Hash, we support 65 assets, which is actually one of the widest offerings for an infrastructure provider out there. But we're really selective in terms of which assets we support. So there's a whole kind of criteria that we use to determine if there's utility, if there's which blockchain it's based on. There's a lot of different criteria that we are very cognizant of before we support that asset.
Okay. Got it. So speak to that cryptocurrency, blockchain, tokenized assets. Give us the world of the differences.
Yeah, sure. So, okay. So cryptocurrency is really just the asset itself. So kind of like Bitcoin, Ethereum, XRP, Solana, different, different assets on there. The blockchain is the distributed ledger that those assets exist on, right? And then tokenized assets are like a cryptocurrency, but they represent a real world asset that exists in the world. So like you could tokenize something like real estate or fine art or music royalties, and that tokenized asset is typically exchangeable for a real tangible good, that doesn't live on the blockchain.
Got it.
Okay, cool.
And then just go a little. So tokenized asset could an IPO, and an ICO kind of combine somehow?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different creative things, projects out there. There's DAOs, there's ICOs, there's IPOs. There are a number of different creative applications for this technology that I think we're just barely scratching the surface on. So, Ethereum, for example, different blockchain than Bitcoin, operates much more like a distributed computer network, and that has the capabilities of smart contracts, right? So you can build smart contracts to execute. So you could do blockchain based, IPOs based around smart contract, for example. There's a lot of different applications.
Okay, great. So Ethereum and other cryptocurrencies, what are the differences? Ethereum and Bitcoin.
Yeah, so those are kind of the two heavy hitters, right? So Ethereum is 5 years newer. I think it was 2013. Vitalik Buterin is the person who.
And do we know what planet he's from? Do we know
Yeah.
if he's Pleiadian?
Exactly.
He's living on the same planet the other guy is.
The one thing I will say, what's interesting is that it's not a pseudonym; it's a real person, and and so we have. There's a bit less kind of mystique around it, right? And more that, hey, here's the intention. You can talk with him and say, like, what was your intention when you were building this? And the thing that's really kind of incredible about Ethereum is one, it's a mechanism for people to build on, right? Bitcoin is a peer-to-peer cash system, right? Ethereum is really a full network that allows for building blocks, meaning that I can create decentralized apps that are basically like apps that you would use in your phone, but that are decentralized. They don't have a central person, controlling it. There's smart contracts that can execute on a certain set of or subset of conditions that don't need human intervention. There is, last year, I think it was 2022, Ethereum underwent a massive change that was years in the making, where it moved from proof of work to proof of stake. And by doing so, it became significantly more energy efficient. And many people feel that it's more secure as the world adopts more Ethereum based smart contract use and expands upon that. So there's a lot more utility to Ethereum in terms of different things that can be built on it. And there's a whole, kind of subset of layer twos, which are, blockchains on top of Ethereum and products that are built on those. So it's definitely a different animal.
And just the gentle difference between proof of work and proof of stake.
Yeah, so proof of stake is, validators are having to put up their own cryptocurrency in order to then validate the validity of a transaction, right? Proof of work is you're doing very complex math and everyone's doing, all the different computers are doing this very complex math in a competitive validation method to confirm transactions and then get a reward. So both the way these systems work are reward based, right? So the validators are doing something all together and someone's winning that race and collecting either Bitcoin or Ethereum to get it. And really proof of stake is a different way to do that, which in order to be a validator for proof of stake, you have to actually put up, I believe it's 32 Ether, which at today's price is, probably 50 grand or so, maybe a little bit more, probably closer to 60 grand, to actually be a validator in that process.
Gosh, thanks for the clarity on that one because that's important. Stable coins. I mean, and by the
Yeah,
way, thanks for doing the hooked on phonics version of this because I know all of our
yeah,
viewers and the whole world is curious about these. So we're just gonna, and you're gonna come back on again, so we'll go deeper and deeper. But
yeah,
stable coins also
yeah, definitely.
interesting.
Stable coins are really interesting, and also, candidly, a lot of our conversations right now at Zero Hash are specifically around stable coins, and
Wow.
specifically, I can't talk to any of our specific customers, obviously, but it is about enabling access to certain stable coins um, as a traditional financial institution, right? So there is a
Mhm.
lot of people in the world where sending money, cross-border payments, things like that, is very difficult and very costly. The international wire system, SWIFT, doesn't have. It's not 24/7, and there's a lot of inherent costs with using some of this functionality. So stablecoins look to address that. I mean, basically, a stablecoin is a cryptocurrency that has a peg, right? Now, most people think of stablecoins as being like 1 to 1 to the US dollar. And yes, the biggest stablecoins are that. But
Mhm.
technically, it doesn't even have to be a peg to a fiat. You could have a stablecoin that is pegged to gold or to silver or any underlying asset that has value. A stablecoin is designed, and as the name suggests, to be a digital version of that price stability for that specific asset. So probably the most common that we deal with today, at least in the U.S., is USDC. And that's last I checked. I think there's 1.6 million users of USDC today,
Mhm.
and they've done 10 trillion in transactions to date. But that network is growing considerably. There is Tether, USDT is the biggest in the world. It's backed 1 to 1 to US dollar reserves. So for every one tether, there's $1 sitting in reserves, and that's used for all sorts of different use cases. I think one other thing to point out about stablecoins is that there are kind of two schools of thought. There are real backed stablecoins, which are either backed with like 1 to 1 US dollar reserves, or maybe it's US treasuries. It's something a traditional asset backing it to support the value as 1 to 1, right? And then
Mhm.
there's the concept of algorithmic stablecoins, which use math to kind of artificially keep the price at a 1 to 1 ratio. What we saw last year, which really kicked off um, what we call kind of the crypto winter, was the failure of Terra Luna, and the stablecoin that was associated with that, which is an algorithmic stablecoin. Essentially, it unwound, which created a domino effect and collapsed.
Wow.
So a lot of people in the industry feel that algorithmic stablecoins, although conceptually are really interesting and could serve a purpose, there's a risk associated without having the real world asset behind it.
Mhm.
Right, right. I think it's always interesting to look on the tertiary influences or of why certain things crash. So
Yeah,
when you zoom out and you might see some central bank digital currencies possibly um, which may be centralized versus
yeah.
a decentralized. You might want to see who the players behind who which caused that domino effect just to see what's going
Yeah, yeah,
on.
yeah. That's a really good point. And while we're on the topic of stablecoins, it's interesting. There's huge within the kind of crypto community. There's a huge amount of support for stablecoins, but a
Yeah.
lot of those same people do not like the idea of central bank digital currencies, which it's really apples and oranges because of the idea of one being decentralized and one being centralized, and kind of the risks associated with central bank digital currencies in terms of government oversight, right? And not to get too into the weeds, but you could create a scenario where certain digital dollars can only be spent on certain items, for example.
Mhm.
And so you can really restrict personal freedoms if you move to a fully digital central bank digital currency. And so that's kind of on the exact opposite of most people in crypto's position.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
I'm more for I personally am more for decentralized. I just think I was saying before that nature acts that way, and biomimicry, it's good to follow suit with nature. So on another show and another episode, we'll dive, maybe we'll take a look at bricks and their central digital currency, and they're looking to back up by gold and other assets, but that'll be another topic. So I do have a question, curiosity, because NFTs and smart contracts.
Yeah. So I
touched
upon smart contracts a little bit earlier, based on the Ethereum blockchain. But basically, they're automatically executed contracts based upon a kind of unique predetermined terms and conditions, right? So I'll give you a real world example. Like, imagine, you don't actually have to imagine, this exists today in certain forms, but like music royalties, right? So right now, that process of getting paid on a song that's being streamed by someone there's a lot of people involved, and there's a lot of delay, and it's not very efficient. You put that on the blockchain, everything's electronic. You have smart contracts that trigger, that say, hey, every time we play, Lex's greatest hit, I get 5%, you get 3%, Lex gets 80%, his management company gets the rest, or whatever that breakdown is.
Molly gets 90%.
Exactly.
That's probably
right.
more like it, Mo, right?
Exactly. So, that's just one kind of example of a smart contract, but you can do a number of different things that basically trigger automatically based upon set conditions. And there's a lot of power in that in terms of efficiencies. You asked about NFTs, non-fungible tokens. Think about those as being unique. So when you hear the word NFT, think unique. The idea is that it's non-fungible. So unlike a US dollar, which you can exchange for another US dollar, like an NFT is its own unique thing, which can be valuable, meaning that, like, I don't look at NFTs as, this JPEG of an ape that, during the NFT bubble, people are paying millions of dollars.
Sorry to interrupt, because this is so out there. I would highly recommend people to, search when they have time, NFTs and some of the images, because some are incredibly beautiful, and then you have like some strange ones. So it's like this weird world that people are getting used to.
Yeah. And the one thing I would say to all the listeners is that don't think of NFTs just as like art. That's been the most publicized kind of way to incorporate NFTs. But an NFT is just simply something that is unique. So it could be a ticket to an event. It could be your seat at an event, right? And so you get this NFT, and it allows you to have a seat at a very exclusive event in a year. And so now I've got this non-fungible token.
Calling me.
Yeah.
What I don't get about this, the NFT part of it is, so it could be on art, it could be on music, it could be on anything, as you said, right? Who preserves the value of the asset that's behind it, right? If there's no centralized government backing it, where does the value prop come with these things? I'm missing the whole point here.
No, you're onto something. So NFTs can be kind of divided into two worlds, right? One, an NFT can represent a real world asset, right? So I've got this NFT, and this NFT entitles me to a pair of Nike shoes, right? So I can go to a store and exchange my NFT for a specific Nike shoe collection, right? That's an example of having a physical asset behind the NFT. On the other hand, you can have an NFT that is itself the product, right? And so, like, this image, right? You and I can just take a screenshot or take a capture of an image on a computer and say, I've got this image. It's a digital image, but the NFT is embedded in that image, which makes it unique. And so, just like art or some other tradable asset, it's really just the value is determined by buyers and sellers. How much is someone willing to pay for this JPEG that is unique, right? And what we saw was that during what I would call kind of the NFT bubble a few years ago, you saw this artificial inflation of value with some of these NFTs. And then, just like we saw, with tulips, 300 years ago, you get to a certain point where people are like, wait, like, why am I paying $1 million for a tulip, right? And so it's the same idea. There are, certainly NFTs that still are holding value, but there was definitely a ton that were overinflated.
Right. So you used the Nike example earlier, the Nike
Mhm.
shoes. So I just want to make sure I understand. So does Nike have to be in on this game too? The Nike, the company,
So
they have to
so with
provide
something,
the
yeah,
good,
with
right?
yeah, with that example, absolutely. So Nike
Okay.
is a
Good
really good
question.
example. Actually, um, they have they have a number of different blockchain based projects and
Hmm.
NFT based projects today.
Hmm.
And so yeah, there's a lot of fashion as an industry that's very interested in kind of unique
Hmm.
offerings, right, and creating that value. And so an NFT is one way to do that.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead, Mal. I just was offered NFTs
Um,
once, and I didn't know what it meant. I thought it was, I thought it was like some kind of drink or something.
right. And by the way, it's non-fungible token, so we'll just
Yes,
Right.
correct.
get that
Okay.
out there. And then I think Gucci uses it to I'm a tomboy,
Yeah,
so I don't, but
Yeah.
they use it to authenticate, correct?
correct. Yeah, that you're exactly right. So
Hmm.
there are a number of use cases. I mean, the technology itself is very functional.
Yeah, we had to put a little
Cool.
gooch in this episode. We had
Little
to
gooch.
spice it up.
We had to
I don't
Yeah,
spice it up
know.
a little
Leave
bit.
it to you,
got to
Mal,
keep
for the
up with
Gucci.
Lex. Okay, Web3. This is an exciting future. How does that tie
Yep.
into crypto?
Yeah, sure. So Web3 is kind of a convenient term for just a massive change in the way that the online world works. So, if you think about Web 2 being the internet as we know it today, and how much impact that had on the world, Web 3 is like taking that and putting it on a distributed blockchain where you're fundamentally changing the way information is stored, how it's shared, and most importantly, how it's owned. Right. So if you have a website or you have any sort of business or functionality like within the web, by putting it on blockchain, you have that history, right? So you can actually show ownership of any number of different things. And so a lot of people will feel that Web3 is going to uh, really democratize the current internet. We see it across the world. There are places where it's very restricted in terms of what can be online, what can't be online. By moving to a Web3 environment and having that distributed, you take out kind of these central companies, these central authorities, and oftentimes central governments from the equation. So it'll be
Wow.
interesting to see how it matures, but Web3 is kind of an all-encompassing term that you talk about, leveraging cryptocurrency payments, you talk about putting information on the blockchain, smart contracts, like all those things tie into Web3.
Okay, cool. And then it would be just as there's a later deep dive, but it'd be interesting to
Yeah,
see, some where things are being hosted and where the
yeah,
servers are, and if that's
yeah, yeah,
also
yeah,
decentralized, because that
yeah,
that that would be interesting. And with the, I love what you guys said, which is a fiat to crypto on ramp. I think that's such a
yeah,
great way to frame it, and that also um, the confidence in a currency. So the acceptance of it, gives
yeah.
it some stability. So how is that being integrated in the world? And is it in the US, or is it slowly coming online? How is it globally? Any countries
Yeah,
taking?
yeah, yeah, yeah. So there's lots of crypto adoption. So what you were touching upon just a moment ago about the on ramps, that video you guys showed to start about our partnership with Stripe. I think it's a
Hmm.
really good example because what that means is that, so like you were talking about an NFT, right? Like someone
Yep.
offered you an
Yeah.
NFT. So to get that ownership of NFT, there's actually a crypto transaction that has to take place, right? So what we've done with Stripe is enabled a way to actually be the plumbing behind the scenes so that you as a user can just swipe your Visa card using Stripe. We do all
Right.
the on-chain conversion to crypto transaction for NFT back to you, ownership. And
Hmm.
from your perspective, you're like, I just swiped my card for $10 and got a picture of an ape or whatever it is, right?
Right.
And so creating that seamless touch point brings down barriers, which Malady, your next question was about crypto adoption. So globally, we're at last count somewhere in the neighborhood of like 429 million global crypto users.
Wow.
of which like 110 million are new as of 2023.
Wow.
And that number is probably
That's
higher.
big.
Yeah, I think that number came out like at the end of Q1 or Q2.
Mhm.
And so it's growing really rapidly. You asked about specific regions, you know, and kind of as a
I feel
whole.
like, sorry to interrupt. I feel like I threw
Mhm.
70 questions into one question.
That's
So
all right.
thanks.
It was
I'm good like that.
72. Who's counting?
Yeah,
Totally.
that's all right. I'll hit them all. I'll hit them all up.
Right.
But talking about
Thanks, Will.
specific countries and kind of where we've seen outside adoption, it goes back to what I said earlier, which is like addressing inefficiencies, right? So
Yeah.
LATAM right now, there's a ton of inefficiencies and there's a ton of inflation, and people don't really trust their native currency in some of these countries, right?
Mhm.
And so there's been massive adoption in Latin America. You know, areas like Venezuela, Colombia, Argentina, where they feel more comfortable having Bitcoin than their own native currency, because their own native currency, the inflation's, you know, kind of out of control. The other
Mhm.
thing is that, you know, if you've got a scenario where someone's working, like let's say they're working in the US and sending money back to Latin America, the fees associated with doing that using traditional fiat rails,
Mhm.
you know, if you've got $100 by the time it gets back to your family in, you know, in Brazil or
Right.
wherever, there's a lot less than $100 by the time it gets to them. If you convert that $100 to USDC, send it, you know, cross border to your family instantaneously, 1-to-1, and then they convert it back into their local currency. There is a lot more value saved in that example. And so, yeah, LATAM. I mean, for Zero Hash, we operate a number of different countries around the world. We've got certain regions of interest.
Mhm.
US is our biggest region. Brazil is actually second in terms of boots on the ground, employees in the country, and,
Oh,
and
wow.
business coming in. So, you know, I think it's definitely a hot spot.
Right.
And
Well, let
just
me.
because,
Oh, sorry.
yeah, oh, go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I was going to ask Will. So, are there certain industries that
Yeah,
are ripe for distribution? You know, with the blockchain and crypto and what have you,
yeah,
or
yeah. I
some
think
kind of
so.
just
Yeah,
yeah.
getting back to what I said before, it's all about inefficiency. So if you look around and you say like, okay, what is an inefficient market? More often than not, there's a solution within blockchain or tokenization for that. So, you know, probably the most obvious example would be real estate. You know, tokenizing real estate, allowing
Mhm.
for, uh, you know, crowdfunding of a property, cutting
Mhm.
out some of the expensive, you know, middlemen in the real estate purchasing process, whether it's
Mhm.
residential or commercial. You know, that's one that's pretty obvious. But I think that you can look around and say any industry where there's inefficiencies is kind of ripe for disruption.
Gotcha. Okay. Cool.
I was just going to say that, you know, we in the United States, we are Bambis compared
Yeah,
to when you're trying to understand, you know, when people lose confidence in their native currencies. So,
right.
you know, to get an idea, Argentina confiscated people holding dollars as a hedge against a
Yeah,
swinging currency, and so people would actually strap dollar bills in chunks to their bodies and
yeah,
try to get across the border. So this is like
correct.
a really
Yeah.
real thing. Yeah.
It is.
Mhm.
It's absolutely it's important. It has real world impact on people's lives. And it's a way to again like provide value and a store of value that is stable.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think the one of the largest, you know, when you're storing Bitcoin, I think, and you tell us,
Hmm.
they're in, you know, like the Swiss Alps, and you go underground into these silos and you're not allowed
Yeah,
to touch the servers. And one of the largest guys is from Argentina.
yeah,
And so he's, you know, I'd pay close attention to those guys. Um
yeah, absolutely.
Is his
so
name is his
real
name Max, by the way? It could be
Yeah.
Max.
So the reason I know so much about Argentina is my husband's from Argentina. Now, there might have been conversations about strapping dollar bills to my body. I did say no, just for the record. Yeah.
That's funny.
All right. So
Interesting.
let's take it back down to the morning brew and my coffee. How do I, you know, what are some real world
Yeah.
cases? Can I buy a cup of coffee with
I,
Bitcoin? How does that work?
I love the fact that you said coffee, because a great real world use case is Starbucks, right? So Starbucks has 29 million, rewards members, right? Which is roughly the same size as the state of Texas, right? And so what they realized is that they could leverage the blockchain to more efficiently manage that rewards program, and also utilize NFTs as a way to create unique, non-fungible rewards to their preferred customers. So, this could be something like a coffee tasting event. It could be something like, specific reserve beans that they're only doing a limited supply of. That's a use case that is alive and well, and that is it's powered on the Polygon blockchain, I believe.
Wow.
So, that's a
I did not
perfect
know
segue
that.
with your coffee there. So.
Wow.
That's wild. And the reason I get up in the morning and breathe is because I would love to see the world decentralize the ownership of securities themselves. And Starbucks is actually an interesting you bring that up, because I've recently just found out that to pull in retail traders and incentivize it, Starbucks, if you buy one share as a shareholder, you get 30% off of all of your coffee. And so then I was like, do other companies, and tons of companies have incentives like that? I never knew that.
Yeah,
So,
it's Cash App, which is owned by Block, which was formerly Square. If you're familiar, Jack Dorsey's company. There's a lot of it was Square, and then it's like its own and so forth. But Cash App works with a ton of firms to basically incentivize if you use Cash App to pay for your coffee, right? Even if it's like a local coffee shop, they may have done a deal with them where they're incentivizing rewards within that app. And what's interesting is Cash App just reported their Q2 earnings last week. They did 5.5 billion in revenue Q2. Half of that came from Bitcoin. So it is
That's
a real
big deal.
material driver for a firm like Block and all of those point of service transactions that they do.
Okay, and then we know that the head of Cash App had that unfortunate.
Yeah.
That's and then if you dive into that, you can go deep diving into a rabbit hole on what's going on there. Okay, and then there's it's taken some hits. So let's say you look up how many times governments have tried to shut Bitcoin down, or there's a lot of lawsuits happening, and then Gary Gensler is debating whether to call it a commodity or security or currency. Can you speak a little bit about what's going on with that?
Sure. So
let me jump in real quick here too. So I'm the regulatory side of things is probably we at Tradier, and especially on our brokerage side, are most sensitive to, right? The regulatory landscape.
We are too. So we run
this
our,
is a good topic,
firm,
I think.
We run our firm like a traditional financial firm in a lot of ways, right? So we are regulated in 51 U.S. jurisdictions. We have money transmitter licenses, and also have in New York State a BIT license, which is one of the kind of most powerful licenses you can have.
Which are probably not. They're probably not easy to get either.
They're actually impossible to get now.
Yeah.
I think I mentioned up front, we've been around since 2017. So we took the approach early on to actually do all of our regulatory stuff up front. So before we ever started onboarding customers, anything like that, we went state by state, got all of the MTLs that were required, and then money transfer licenses, and then also applied for the New York DFS BIT license.
Wait, let's just give you a round of applause.
To give you an idea, in that environment, which now it's even tougher, that's like a 3-year exercise. So now I think it would be considerably longer for a firm that just launched today and said, hey, I want to do what you guys do. There's a real barrier to entry. Is it
like the DMV on steroids?
Yeah, it's pretty arduous, and candidly, we're going through that process all around the world with different regulators. So we're OzTrack regulated in Australia. We're licensed as a financial services provider in New Zealand. We're in the process of getting our FCA license in the UK, and our license via the Netherlands for EU. So these are multi-year endeavors that that require a lot of resources, but we're very cognizant of doing things the right way. So I think your original question was kind of around some of the failures. Yep.
Yeah, and when you look at your relationship, when your partnership with Stripe, that's a big reason that they chose you.
Yeah. I mean, it's been choppy waters for the last year. You had, I think I mentioned, you had Terra Luna blow up, you had Celsius go down, you had BlockFi, FTX was the biggest, bigger than Bernie Madoff, in terms of really the amount of money that just evaporated. And it was essentially, they were doing something that it gave crypto a bad name, but they were doing something that anyone could do in any industry, which is take customer funds and go run off and buy property with it, or use it to buy a boat or an island, like whatever you wanted to do.
Yeah, and this is interesting too, because if you really read, it's coming, they're in bankruptcy, suit, so you can see a lot of these transcripts, and you can see that Jay Clayton, former chairman of the SEC, was talking to Sam Bankman-Fried from the very beginning. They had several meetings, and so I just want to zoom out and look again at when something falls, who are all the players that topple something, right? And see what their motivations are to what's going on.
It's a pretty egregious example of kind of like almost like a magic act, like showing like a lot of bright shiny lights where you're not seeing what the other hand's doing, right? They had the naming rights on the Miami Heat, arena. They, all the major league umpires had FTX patches, F1, so on and so forth. I mean, candidly, at my last firm, when I was dealing in natural language processing and AI, like FTX was a customer of ours, and they were a good customer of ours, and we were as surprised as anyone. But it just goes to show that it wasn't, kind of crypto specific. It was really just an egregious act of too much money and not really having the proper regulations in place to make sure that money wasn't being allocated in an erroneous way, right? And so with all of that, what's happened is that there's an increased scrutiny from U.S. regulators, but candidly, regulators across the world on the cryptocurrency marketplace. And the one thing I will say is I feel like we're heading in a much better direction. And I think once some of the dust settles, and it's starting to settle, there will be real world kind of rules in place that will prevent these type of things from happening. And I think we're extremely well positioned for that. So I mentioned FTX, Celsius, BlockFi, Luna. Zero Hash didn't have any exposure to any of those firms. We've been able to not navigate these waters extremely well and continue to grow alongside of it. I think with you mentioned Gensler trying to say, is this a security or is this a commodity, and so on and so forth. That's actually something that puts the U.S. in a really deficient position globally. So if I go back to my
this
time,
is interesting.
So when I lived in London, and I was setting up our UK entity at forex.com, I was dealing with the UK regulator, the FCA there. And what's interesting is like somewhere like the UK doesn't care if Bitcoin is a commodity or security. They care what you're doing with it. So they don't try to classify any asset as something. They just say, well, what are you doing with it? Are you soliciting, miners? Are you advertising on TV with it? Are you giving advice? Are you proprietary trading that asset? Like, what is the actual function that you're doing? And we're going to regulate that function. So these other countries are able to move much faster. So like you saw real meaningful regulation come out of Europe already. You've seen it coming out of the UK. And the U.S. is still sitting around trying to figure out, well, what is this thing? Because we've got these different government bodies that look after different things, and they're competing in a very public way. It's a turf war. It's hey, this is security because I want to regulate it. This is a commodity because I want to regulate it. Whereas all the other countries are like, why are you hung up on this? Like, just regulate it in an efficient way as to what people are doing with it. And so that's going to actually be a big hurdle for the U.S. to have to overcome. And I think that that Congress and the government is starting to realize that we're falling behind as a result of that.
Right. And then, this may get geopolitical, and I'm not really, I'm more into the fight, follow the money trail personally. But we personally, the United States has been shipping a lot of gold out. and
Yeah.
then we're suppressing this thing that could strengthen us. So why is that happening? And so just to,
Well,
if you're,
yeah, here's another funny one. Who do you think has the most Bitcoin? Like, who holds it the most?
oh, I don't know. I should know that, but I
It's
don't.
the U.S. government. So the U.S.
Oh,
government
wow.
has massive amounts of crypto because of things like Hidden Road and other where they've seized it, right? And
Yeah.
they're not
Oh,
selling it.
right.
So
And
they understand that it's a hedge as well. If you look at most of the major governments out there have some sort of allocation in Bitcoin, even if they don't believe, even if they want it to go away and never come back, it's a hedge. And so
yes.
they're operating under that assumption. Of all of the largest holders, I think Ukraine is like sixth or seventh in Bitcoin holdings in the world. I think they're the one of the top countries that's actually holding Bitcoin, which makes sense, because of the volatile situation. So.
Yeah, and MicroStrategy.
Yeah.
I was going to say, so if you look at Grayscale Trust, you can also, just go on Yahoo Finance and you can see who those main holders are. And that's ETH. And then you can, that's another Zoom. I'm beating that word to death, but it's always like, I just never want to be myopic on why, if you don't understand why we're going one direction, you can find the pieces right around you.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely.
And that's interesting because Coinbase, when they first started out, they were also upfront and really trying to stay on top of regulation, and the regulators loved them for that. But now they're under attack a bit. What's going on there?
So what's interesting is that Coinbase has essentially put the industry on its shoulders and said, like, hey, we've got the resources, we're gonna fight this battle for everyone, right? What's probably most relevant to that upcoming Coinbase lawsuit is what has happened in the Ripple lawsuit. So specifically around XRP, which is the token. Basically, it was announced that it didn't, the judge ruled that it didn't pass the Howey test, which is used in other, traditional markets, and therefore didn't qualify.
The Howey test being an SEC test, correct?
Correct. Yeah. So it's basically saying, like, does it embody the characteristics of a security? Like, do you when you buy XRP, do you assume it's going to increase in value? Is like one of the criteria, right? And so they came back and said, no, this doesn't qualify, which was really encouraging for us. Immediately, we saw Coinbase, Kraken, Bitstamp, other exchanges relist XRP. For us personally at Zero Hash, XRP was an asset, one of our 65s that we considered valid and did not did not ever discontinue support. So our underlying customers maybe didn't want to list XRP because of this pending lawsuit, but we never since 2020 never stopped supporting it. So what it allowed for is, as soon as this lawsuit hit, literally that day, we had customers that were like, let's relist XRP out to our customers, right? And so, keep in mind, we're a B2B organization. So we're powering these other firms that then allow them to extend this token. So we were able to kind of nimbly say, hey, let's flip on XRP. And of course, volumes went through the roof in that token because of it. But it really was a big win for the industry to say, like, this, you have to look at these assets individually and use pre-existing criteria to classify them. And this doesn't pass that pre-existing criteria. So why do you think you can regulate it as such? And so that's kind of, I think, a big win. And it'll be interesting to see how that continues to play out in the Coinbase lawsuit.
Got it. And so if you were to, and I don't know if you can talk to this, but if you were going to say whether, I'd like to know Bitcoin separate from cryptocurrencies. Do you think it's currency, commodity, security? What name would you put on it?
So, I mean, right now it embodies the characteristics of a commodity. Again, like, this is a U.S. unique problem, right? Trying to classify it. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. Should we just briefly state the difference, if you wanted to state the difference between a security and a commodity?
I mean, yes. I mean, basically, like, I think commodities, at least my opinion, are that it has, certain characteristics, right? So, like, a commodity would have some degree of scarcity to it, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
I also think a commodity, probably has to adhere to some sort of storage capability, right? So, like, you have to be able to store the commodity, and ultimately be able to exchange it for value.
And
A
a
security,
secure
yeah,
would be like, there's a guy out there that if, like, for instance, on Joe Rogan, Elon Musk smoked weed and it dropped
yeah,
his stock price. So if there's someone
right,
out there who can
right,
affect something, I mean, just to simplify
yeah.
it,
No,
right?
yeah. That, I mean, that's a really good. That's a good way to put it. Yeah, I mean, a security is, in my opinion, a much more narrower world in which we live in. But yeah, so I think that dependent upon the cryptocurrency, it could be classified as a commodity. It could be classified as a security. Like, there's absolutely tokens out there that should be classified as securities. So I'm not of the
Mhm.
belief to say, like, oh, none of these are. It's just the ones that we operate in. We intentionally don't list or support assets that we feel are securities. We're not in
Mm.
the
Got it.
securities business, and so we're very
Got it.
careful about that. And we use pre-existing criteria to say, like, this is what we support and this is what we don't support.
Got
Okay.
it. Cool.
And then crypto's, just wrap it up into crypto's
Yeah.
future. Where do you see it going?
So I'm excited. I mean, I think that as we start to get common sense regulation in place, global adoption's already taking off, as we touched upon. I think the crypto winter is ending. There's a ton of real world use cases. I mentioned Block. Their earnings, 5.5 billion, half of it coming from Bitcoin. That's a big deal. On Monday, so 2 days ago, PayPal launched their own stablecoin. You're talking about the
Wow, big
biggest
one.
payment network out there, launching their own dollar-backed stablecoin, which is a total game changer in terms of bringing
Mhm.
this foreground. But even beyond that, look at how many major tier one investment platforms have moved into crypto or blockchain in the last year, right? You've got BlackRock, Fidelity, JP Morgan, Morgan Chase, Goldman Sachs, Interactive Brokers, who we work with. All of these firms are doing something, whether it's trying to launch an ETF, offering spot Bitcoin trading, tokenizing their futures products. I mean, you've got Franklin Templeton, $1 trillion asset manager, is operating their money market fund on the blockchain using their own Benji
Wow.
token as a redemption vehicle for that. Wisdom Tree Prime just launched a direct to retail app last month, which offers spot Bitcoin and spot Ethereum trading directly in there. It also offers 9 different blockchain based funds. So these are, huge industry names
Wow.
Mhm.
that are now drinking the Kool-Aid. And so I think it's an extremely exciting time to be in digital assets and to be in crypto.
Yeah.
We
Awesome.
cannot thank you enough. That was really, really nice. Like, that was
Cool.
I've done a lot of research, and that was a really well succinct, presentation and introduction for a lot of people. So thank you.
Awesome.
Appreciate
I'm
it.
so happy
Thanks,
you guys
Will.
invited me to join. This was a lot of fun, and the time flew by.
Yeah, it did. It was
So
awesome. It was
And
fantastic. Molly, thanks for being the
yeah,
hostess with the mostest there. Holy
I'm
cow.
gonna give Lex MVP on his analogy of
yeah, I'm going
bourbon
to use
cocktails.
that, by the
That
way.
was solid.
I'll
You can tell when
definitely
I'm
use
this
that.
quiet that I don't
That
know anything
was
about the
so
topic. So
no, it's amazing. I talk too much.
Fantastic.
I just talk too much. So you're gonna shut
no,
me up.
No, this was
that was
great. This was
really
really
good.
enjoyable.
That was great. Well, we appreciate it.
Awesome.
So
Well, thanks for
and
having me
zero
on.
hash, zero hash. You're moving fully forward into
Yeah.
the future of this digital asset space,
Yeah, I
right? You
mean,
guys
like,
are the
to
yeah.
sum it up, we feel every company is eventually going to be a blockchain, crypto,
Yep.
Web3 based company in some capacity. And so we work today with a number of financial institutions, neobanks, wealth management firms, broker dealers, etc. But we also work with non-financial firms. I mean, we operate staking nodes for DraftKings, for example. Like,
Nice.
we believe that there is a huge wide future, whether it's Stripe, whether it's Interactive Brokers, or a company like DraftKings, that we can facilitate that plumbing in order to bring them to that future of Web3.
Nice.
And I know you just said this, but now to reduce it a little bit, who should call you? So, and I know you just said this, but if
No,
if no one knows anything about crypto and they're starting, you know, do you have a fintech company? Like,
right.
break it down to someone who should be calling
honestly,
you.
So we service. I would break down our customers into kind of just a couple main verticals. So basically, like investment platforms, which I look after, which are broker dealers, neobanks, digital banks, wealth management firms, and then there's payment firms. So like a Stripe, remittance firms, fintech firms that are operating kind of cross-border payments or P2P payments in that space. And then there's the kind of the bucket for everyone else, which is anyone who wants to do anything in terms of blockchain, NFTs, Web3, wants to roll that out within their business. Reach out. We provide a number of infrastructure solutions for that as well.
Is there anything you don't do? It sounds like you do it all.
We do everything as long as it's above board.
Love
good.
it.
Good to see that out in the open. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks you guys, and thank you, Lex, for letting me be curious today. I really appreciate it. And thanks, Will.
You were awesome. Will, thanks so much. This was awesome. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it. So we're gonna close it right there, buddy. We'll talk later.
All right. Take care.
Cheers.
Bye.